Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, April 6, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jonathan Robbins, Associate Professor of History at Michigan Technological University, author of Oil Palm, A Global History. Then we will be speaking with Warren Hilsbos, organizer with the West Virginia Rising Coal Baron Blockade of Granttown Power Plant, scheduled for 3 days from now on April 9th. That's the power plant that Joe Manchin sells his dirty, literally dirty coal to. Super dirty coal to. Also on the program today, Biden administration has sent $100 million worth of Javelin missiles to Ukraine as evidence of Russian war crimes mount. White House pauses student loan repayment again, this time until September 1st. Just a reminder, it's 2 months before the midterm elections. Republican senators blocking anti-COVID funding to force a vote on Title 42, permanent Title 42. Meanwhile, Ohio Republicans introduced their version of the Don't Say Gay bill. Oklahoma lawmakers pass a near total ban of abortion in that state. Supreme Court uses its emergency powers to reverse a decision that froze a Trump EPA rule. Speaking of the EPA, Biden administration EPA to tighten rules on the use of asbestos. And 3 weeks ago, British Airlines got rid of their mask mandates. And now they're canceling flights for lack of a healthy staff. Shanghai still in full lockdown. And lastly, just breaking, no charges in the killing of Amir Locke, shot in a no-knock raid in Minneapolis, of which he had nothing to do with, except for being on the receiving end of a couple of bullets from a cop. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Apologies about yesterday, and a thank you to Emma Vigeland for holding down the fort. There was some, I had a combination of a child who was projectile vomiting and a lack of a babysitter. So
yeah, that's
one of those days. Everybody is feeling better though today.
Good.
And multiple COVID tests later, everybody is fine. And just wait for the next adventure.
That's what they say being a parent is, right? Just a series of adventures.
I've never heard anybody say that. They certainly didn't say that to me before I became a parent. But yes, take that as a warning. So that is exactly the, I just got an IM saying, what exactly is the emergency the Supreme Court keeps citing as it does nefarious business of destroying democracy in the context of shadow dockets? No one knows what the emergency is.
That's because the docket is in shadows.
In the shadows. And in fact, that is what the dissent was saying there's a good chance this ruling is going to ultimately, this is a temporary stay. But essentially, the Trump administration had used the EPA to promulgate a rule, essentially, which is like it's a regulation, almost like a law, to the extent that an agency can create a law that basically said, contrary to the existing Clean Water Act, states can basically allow more poison into waterways. And a district court overturned the use of that regulation because it was contrary to the statute. The Biden administration wanted to roll it back and end it. And there were Republican states that contested this. And then the Supreme Court just stepped in and said, no, we're going to give an emergency stay to this because presumably, I guess, and they don't have to offer any explanation, but presumably they were afraid that it would be too disruptive for states to allow their companies to put more poison in the water. And that had to be dealt with quickly. You can't have we're in an emergency situation. There is a diminishment of the amount of poison going into the water. So we need to stop that. That's effectively what the Supreme Court is saying.
The levels are all out of whack in terms of poison to water ratio.
Exactly.
That's our constitutional duty.
But this is, I don't, we can only speculate as to the reasoning, but it just seems either highly, I don't know. I mean, political, or maybe it's worse than that, in that it's a sort of like just a signaling, we're coming for all of these EPA regulations. It could be both. So we'll see. But let's get to this clip. Zelensky was speaking in front of the UN yesterday. If you've been watching the news at all, and even if you are someone who I think is properly skeptical about information that you get during wartime, and even if you are someone who also, like me, can't help but look at these images and wonder, what if there had been this type of reporting in Fallujah, or other places in Iraq,
or currently in Yemen?
But specifically, when you hear the stories of Russian soldiers busting down doors, I don't know. I've never heard of stories where, well, that's not true. Let me put it this way. I've heard of stories of U.S. Military personnel in Iraq killing prisoners, killing civilians, wanton shooting, but I have not heard of the U.S. government and the media so aggressively saying, like, well, these victims are obviously crisis actors. Now, that doesn't make those killings any less egregious and horrible.
Like, for example, the war criminal that Trump pardoned who killed all those civilians, the coverage from the United States' perspective, at least on Fox News, was, well, they were defending our country. There wasn't the accusation that you described.
Right. But within the context of the United States, at least in that situation, that person was considered a war criminal, and even by the military. There was no institutional support for this person to be pardoned. Anyways, so there's a massive amount of pressure, and we're starting to see, Europe respond to these atrocities. But the Biden administration, fortunately, has remained steadfast in making sure that the U.S. is not more directly involved. Obviously, we're sending weapons there. I would be surprised if we didn't have covert operations on the ground in some fashion or another, providing support in some fashion or another. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. But the Biden administration has remained steadfast in preventing a pretext for an expansion of this war. And here is an exchange where CBS, remember, recently hired Mick Mulvaney as just a guy who comes on and makes comments about, the budget.
The budget wonk.
Yeah, the budget wonk, who incidentally was not only a member of the Freedom Caucus, but people said one of the most incompetent OMB heads there have ever been. But here is CBS reporter. Do we know the name of this
Steve
reporter?
Portnoy.
Steve Portnoy.
Wonder if he's related to Dave.
Don't know. Here is Steve Portnoy asking Jen Psaki some questions yesterday at the White House press briefing. Thank you.
Just to put a finer point on some of the questions so far been asked, why shouldn't the images of the atrocities from Bucha compel a worldwide, unified, coalition kinetic response?
You mean a military war? Tell me more about what you mean.
Or a military response led by the United States and the international partners.
As in bringing military troops on the ground from the United States and NATO.
Well, the president's described outrageous things. You've called them atrocities. You've said perhaps we should brace ourselves for worse. Why not?
I think what the president's objective is and his responsibility is to make decisions that are in the interests of the United States and the national security of the United States. And the American people. And that is not to go to war with Russia. It is to do everything in our power to hold them accountable, to support efforts through international systems to do exactly that, and to provide military assistance, security assistance, and support to the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. That's exactly what we're doing. But it is not in our interests or in the interest of the American people for us to be in a war with Russia. Go ahead.
I love the use of that kinetic.
Yeah.
A global kinetic response.
Kinetic response.
Do a local kinetic response to my hunger after the show.
He felt very, very official and very serious by using that term.
Yeah, that is also just like, honestly, this may seem a little sophomoric, but that is literally the way that you signify. Like it's either that or wear a shirt that says I'm a douchebag. And those are the two ways that you can establish that.
Yeah.
When you refer to starting World War III as a kinetic response.
And then, I mean, she was good at how she responded to that, basically asking a series of thinly veiled, incredulous follow-ups until like it was just revealed how insane his question was, because his final question at the end was, quote, why not? Like, F it. Why not? World War III. I mean, that's what that was. Like, he talks about the atrocities that are being done by the Russians onto Ukraine, which is accurate. That's true. So why not commit more atrocities? F it. Screw it. Let's go to town. That's the crux of his question. But he uses sophisticated language like kinetic response. So he feels like it's not just a completely,
it's not. He's a serious person,
right? As opposed to
responding
like an animal. Action.
Global kinetic response sounds like a new exercise movement that's taken the world by craze.
Yeah, or it could just be the fact that the Earth spins on its axis. It is really. It's why wouldn't we say we see the deaths of hundreds or thousands of civilians and not say, and we raise you those number of deaths by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions.
Let's go occupy Moscow.
Exactly.
Ryan Grimm has a new video for his montage now. That he has.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Folks, we'll be talking to Jonathan Robbins in a moment about oil palm, a global history. But first, some words from our sponsors. It is spring. You wouldn't really. I mean, it's getting there, right? April showers and a little bit cold. It is time to make your outdoor space feel more like a yard and less of a plant cemetery. And when it comes to caring for your plants, know-how matters. That's why FastGrowingTrees.com's experts curate thousands of plant varieties that will thrive in your specific climate and location. You order online or over the phone, your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Of course, that is, depending on your zone, You don't want your plants to come too early, but we're basically in the temporal zone now. I wasn't, not to be confused with geographical zone, in which those plants get shipped immediately. Plus, their growing and care advice is available 24/7. Doesn't matter whether you're looking for privacy, shade, adding some natural beauty to your yard, or frankly, fruit trees. Fast growing trees have the perfect plants and the expertise to help you find them. Even if you've never had a green thumb, they'll make you feel like you do. 1 million home gardeners have already seen what fastgrowingtrees.com can do for them. Plus, their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, you can trust everything will be healthy for years to come. I have bought multiple fruit trees over the years from Fast Growing Trees. I don't know if the trees actually grow any faster, but they ship much bigger trees than anywhere else. And some of these fruit trees, you get fruit in the first year.
Nice.
Then, of course, the second year and whatnot. I also gotten a bunch of long grass from Fast Growing Trees. And the stuff comes shipped incredibly fast, but also is shipped well. I don't always have the opportunity to open them up as quickly as you probably should, but they stay damp in the way that they ship them. Trees are in great shape, and the support has been amazing over the years. Should I plant this tree? What's the pollinator I need, et cetera, et cetera. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com/majority right now, and you're going to get 15% off your entire order. Now's the time to do it, folks. 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com/majority. Fastgrowingtrees.com/majority. Also, this program today, sponsored by My Solar Nerd. You can go to mysolarnerd.com. Apparently, there was some problems with the website, the direct link to the website last week. It's been fixed. mysolarnerd.com. I spoke about the IPCC report that came out over the past couple of days. It's actually the same. It's a different part of the same report that came out 6 months ago. Whatnot. The bottom line is, it's a bit of a crap show, as it were. And of course, we need broader policy to deal with this. But in the meantime, homeowners can do something on their own. And it's also one of those things that not only do you feel better about not being so reliant on fossil fuels, you save money. MySolarNerd.com is a solar consultant, fan of the show, been listening for years. They used to be involved in the solar industry. They saw that homeowners were sometimes being either, had no idea what they were doing, what was available to them. Sometimes some of these companies were predatory as far as he was concerned. He set up mysolarnerd.com to basically let homeowners know the solar options that are are available for them. You can now retrofit a home with solar panels with no money down. Most homeowners that switch over to solar see significant savings starting in their first year. This is possible in a large part to the solar investor tax credit, which is diminishing by almost 12%, 15% by the end of the year. So check it out now. My Solar Nerd's mission is simple. They help you find the best solar program for your home. They make the transition as easy as possible. And they do this by analyzing your usage, finding the best equipment for your needs, determining the incentives and financing you qualify for, and then they project manage the process between you and the installers, obtain all the permits, oversee the whole project. Like I say, some of those tax credits and incentives are sunsetting. Get on it now. The current 26% tax credit drops down to 22% next year before going away. If a project is completed by the end of this year, you get the full 26%. Some markets are prone to power outages, may qualify you for off-grid backup solutions. You may have some state and local incentives as well. And Majority Report listeners are going to get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system. Go to mysolarnerd.com right now, fill out the inquiry form. Make sure that you select a Majority Report listener for how you heard about My Solar Nerd to receive that $200 gift card upon installation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Jonathan Robbins. He's Associate Professor of History at Michigan Technological University, author of Oil Palm, A Global History Later in the program, we're going to be talking to an organizer with the West Virginia Rising Coal Baron Blockade taking place this weekend. And as always, a reminder, it's your support that makes the show possible. If you want the free show, free of commercials, go to jointhemajorityreport.com. All right, we'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Jonathan Robbins, Associate Professor of History at Michigan Technological University, author of Oil Palm, A Global History. Jonathan, welcome. Joined by Emma Vigeland. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Sam and Emma.
Of course.
Okay, so I've got to ask you the first question. This is the same question I asked when your book came up, when we were looking at booking. Why do I care about palm oil?
Well, you care about palm oil because it's in a lot. I wouldn't say everything, but just about everything that you buy in the supermarket. You're consuming it every day. It's by far the world's biggest oil industry. And the places where it's produced, mostly in Southeast Asia and in tropical regions in Africa and Latin America as well, are experiencing some of the highest rates of deforestation, biodiversity loss, displacement of indigenous communities compared to anywhere else in the world. And it's this industry that's the main driver of it.
And you've done I guess, I don't know, maybe it's the most comprehensive history of palm oil that has existed. But give us, start us off, like when did palm oil, and it is shifted as to where the primary supplies have come from over the years, right? I mean, when was the first usage of palm oil?
Well, it comes from this plant, the oil palm tree, which is indigenous to Western Africa, and palm oil has been produced and used and traded in that region for thousands of years. It becomes a global commodity in the 18th and 19th century in association with the transatlantic slave trade. Palm oil was used as a food on slave ships, and small amounts of it made their way back to Europe on these slave ships, and it was first used as medicine, as a skin cream and an ointment, and this was borrowing directly from African medicinal practices. And as Great Britain and other European powers slowly began to abolish the slave trade in the 19th century, the transatlantic slave trade, many of these former slave trading companies, slave trading ships, were looking for other cargo, and palm oil was there. It had these existing medicinal uses, and it was beginning to be used in some of the key industries of the Industrial Revolution, soap making, candles, and eventually, by the end of the 19th century, in food. And so Africa for 100 years was the only source, really, of palm oil until the 20th century, when there's this dramatic pivot to Southeast Asia and the creation of this plantation industry that is still with us today, and is where most palm oil comes from today.
What contributed to that shift, and was that when? Was there I guess these are two separate questions, but was there a jump in the prominence of palm oil as a commodity?
Yeah, so one of the things I try to emphasize in the book is that palm oil is one of many different fats and oils that are being produced in this 19th century, 20th century period. There's whale oil, there's animal fats like lard from pigs, there's coconut oil. And all of these things are being jumbled together and mixed up. They're being treated with new chemical processes that are being developed that let them be interchanged. And what makes palm oil stand out among all of these other competing products is that it's the plant that makes it is very productive. It makes more oil per tree per acre than coconut, for example. And this high productivity and the versatility of palm oil in finished products means that it is really in demand by the 20th century. And so there's a big interest by plantation companies in growing lots of it. And for various reasons, these companies can't get the land, they can't get the labor that they want in Africa. And they do get it in Southeast Asia, where colonial regimes are more than happy to give them access to giant expanses of forest at really cheap rates, and provide them with coerced indentured labor as well. And these two things combine to make this very productive plantation industry in Southeast Asia that basically replaces Africa as a source of palm oil on the world market.
And in terms of the forests themselves, I mean, they're buying up these large swaths of rural forest area. I mean, what effect does that have outside of the extremely exploitative labor practices on any deforestation that's happening in those regions?
Well, deforestation has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Goes back centuries in Southeast Asia. But the scale of it, the intensity of it, just accelerates dramatically in the 20th century, and especially after 1950. And there's some technological changes that account for that. We've got chainsaws and bulldozers and these machines showing up that make it easier to cut down forest. But the other factor is that the market for palm oil is booming around the world. People, not just in wealthy industrial countries like Western Europe and the United States, but all over the world, they're eating more and more fat. They're eating more margarine. They're eating more fried foods. And so there seems to be this unlimited market for things like palm oil. And because the land is available, because these companies are given access to it, they keep expanding and expanding and expanding.
I want to go back. I'm sorry. I want to go back to just when that turn from Africa to Southeast Asia. What was it that was inhibiting essentially? It sounds like an inhibition of colonialism in Africa at that time, or at least in specifically in terms of this commodity. What were the sort of the general themes that were inhibiting that, and then I want to just sort of pivot along with that pivot to Southeast Asia as to what colonial powers basically did to gain those lands.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a common misconception about colonialism broadly and particularly in Africa, that it's this domineering presence that European colonial powers could do whatever they want. And it's not to say that colonialism was not exploitative, was not oppressive, was not extremely violent, but it was very fragile, very brittle, and it relied on the support, in many cases, of local leaders, local chiefs, local kings who allied themselves with these colonial administrations. And in Africa, for the most part, these leaders did not want to give up land. They faced real pressures from their own people to resist plantation land grabs. And workers themselves, whenever they had a choice, did not want to work on plantations. And they often had other outlets, like growing palm oil themselves, or growing other crops like cocoa or cotton. And so these things come together in Africa to make large-scale plantations just not commercially viable. And in contrast, in Southeast Asia, you've got the same colonial powers there. The same colonial context, but the areas that are being targeted for plantations are very thinly populated compared to the palm oil regions in Africa. So there's a very small population. They don't have as much ability to resist efforts to take their land. And in most cases, these forest communities retreat. They move deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest as these plantations clear land. And the other factor here is labor. Because this region was relatively thinly populated for more than a century by the time the oil palm shows up, companies had been importing workers from southern India, from China, from the island of Java and what is now Indonesia, under very harsh basically indentured servant contracts, which was for a long time basically slavery. Very few people actually ever got out of these contracts. And colonial governments encouraged this, they supported it. At times they subsidized the importation of these coerced workers. This continued into the 20th century in this region. So there was the supply of relatively cheap labor that could be controlled, it could be forced to work on land that was available and relatively cheap. And this just wasn't the case in most parts of Africa.
Who or which countries were essentially the colonialists here? I mean, who was it? Great Britain? Was the U.S. involved in this? Was it mostly European powers? Where were these coming from?
Yeah, so Britain is certainly the big player, and it has at this key period where the industry jumps from Africa to Southeast Asia, Britain has colonies in both places, all across West Africa and East Africa, as well as in what is now Malaysia in Southeast Asia. And so British companies, what is today Unilever, is very heavily involved in both Africa and in Southeast Asia in developing the palm oil industry. The other big plantation center is what is now Indonesia, which had been a Dutch colony up until the end of the Second World War. And the Dutch had given up, they had a very small colonial presence in Africa, which they had abandoned by the 20th century. But the Dutch and Dutch companies, and really some early multinationals. It's hard to call them British or Dutch companies because their shareholders are from all over the place. They're the ones who are really driving these investments in early plantations.
And so, where are we today with palm oil? Where is it? We still have the same sort of colonial players? Are we still we still have more or less slave labor that is providing us with palm oil?
Well, there have been some really significant changes. And so I'll start with the labor situation. This highly coerced labor more or less disappears by the 1930s and 1940s. And there's a period in which palm oil is not a bad business to be in. Workers are relatively well paid, and there are a lot of small-scale farmers who participate in this industry. They work alongside plantations, and they earn a pretty good living through the 1970s and 1980s. More recently, coerced labor has come back in the form of undocumented migration. And there's been a number of really serious allegations of plantation companies abusing undocumented workers because they don't have legal protections. And so there's some echoes here of this colonial legacy, but it is a different political situation. In terms of the players, some of the companies that were active in the colonial era are still around. So Unilever is a big one. It doesn't own plantations today, but it's still very heavily involved in the palm oil industry. There are a couple of other, there's a Belgian company called Socfin that is a big plantation interest and has been around for more than 100 years at this point. And a lot of the colonial era companies that were European owned, a few of them were American owned, were eventually bought out by Asian investors, by Malaysian and Indonesian and Japanese and Korean and Chinese financiers who have kept a lot of the same corporate practices, but just transferred ownership.
Is there anything happening in terms of Congress to deal with the issues that are coming up on the business in these businesses? I mean, do we have any? Does the U.S. have any type of, regulatory system, or is there anything that's, to look into or to in any way inhibit the use of what sounds like nearly slave labor on palm oil coming into this country?
Yeah, and it relies on some very old laws that date back to the early 1900s that were put in place specifically about concerns over unfair competition with American manufacturers, unfair competition from exploitative labor practices overseas. And some of these laws have been dusted off and used just last year. Customs and Border Patrol banned shipments from a very big Malaysian palm oil company over allegations of labor abuses. And so there is a regulatory framework that exists. We have laws in place. I think one of the takeaways I hope your listeners pick up is that the U.S. is a relatively small fish in the palm oil world. The U.S. does buy a lot of palm oil from Southeast Asia, but the biggest consumers by far are India, China, Indonesia itself, and it's these countries that really dominate and are really driving these dynamics in how palm oil is produced.
And how about companies that present themselves as all natural, sort of progressive-ish? I mean, we're here in Brooklyn. If I go to the vegan grocery store or whatever that I see, there's Dr. Bronner's there and things like that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how their practices play into this?
Yeah, well, Dr. Bronner's is an unusual example in that they have a long history of seeking out partners that they feel are behaving ethically. And Dr. Bronner's actually operates a palm oil facility in Ghana where they don't own any land. It's not a plantation. They partner with local farmers and help them, adhere to USDA standards. They pay attention to welfare. But this is a very small, a minuscule slice of the palm oil market. There's a much larger industry group called the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil that has created a sustainable certification label that you may see on some products. And this is an industry-led group. It relies a lot on self-policing, and there have been a lot of complaints that it's not a very effective system. But the bigger issue, even with this RSPO certification, is that it relies on companies and consumers ultimately being willing to pay more for palm oil, being willing to pay a premium for sustainable, ethical palm oil. And the last figures I saw, which are a couple years old, showed that half of all of the certified palm oil that was available went unsold or went unsold at this premium price, which really shows that the companies could be buying more. More ethical oil. They're choosing not to.
That's not a shock to me. Jonathan Robbins, the book is Oil Palm, A Global History. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for talking to me.
Okay, folks. Fascinating. You don't really tend to think of palm oil that much. I don't. I haven't in the past. I guess I will now.
Now I will. Yeah.
All right.
Although I do love coconut oil.
We have
that's a good makeup remover if there are any women watching. Saves you a lot of money.
I didn't know that.
Or, men who like to wear makeup or anybody.
Anybody.
Okay.
For makeup.
Yeah. I mean, you wear a lot of makeup.
Let's go into want to get to this these couple of clips. KBJ will be, when do we know when that vote will be?
Tomorrow, I think.
It's Thursday. Right. Okay. I lost the day this week. Full Senate is going to be voting on Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination tomorrow. It is, appears as of now, it's going to be 53-47 in terms of assuming all the senators are there in terms of approving her nomination in the full Senate.
No more flight issues.
No more flight issues, etc. There's a lot of things that have been disturbing about this process, not the least of which how much the Democrats failed in taking advantage of this golden opportunity to show the American public how deranged the Republican Party has become. And the and here is Exhibit A of that derangement. Maybe it's Exhibit B, or maybe it could be Exhibit AA in terms of the numbers. But between some of the key members of the Judiciary Committee and just sort of these, just the general Republican senators, it has been extraordinary how little hay the Democrats have made of this. Here's Tom Cotton. Maybe Donald Trump doesn't run. One of the key Republican would-be nominees for the presidency in 2024.
That was used in an unsuccessful attempt to blow up a passenger airplane. Another planned and executed a rocket attack on U.S. forces.
He's talking
in
about
Afghanistan.
Pause it. We should say this is just coming in the middle of him talking about some of the prisoners held in Guantanamo that Ketanji Brown Jackson was part of representing, because in this country, we have a fundamental right of people who are in criminal trial to be defended. And she was doing this on behalf of essentially the government on some level. So here we go.
And a third was arrested in a raid on an al-Qaeda explosives training camp. Yet in every case, she claimed that none of them had anything to do with terrorism. Not a thing. Totally innocent, just goat herders who were picked up by marauding American troops.
All right, I'm sorry. Just pause it right there. The facts on the ground show that at least half of the prisoners in Guantanamo were innocent, and they're being held there indefinitely. He's just basically broadly claiming that all of them are guilty of these terroristic acts that he's accusing them of. For I don't know the specific cases that he's talking about there, but these prisoners have been held for decades at this point in many cases without a trial, so there's no way to determine the facts or the accusations that he's putting out there. But
Right.
like he's just like an old school fascist. When he does run eventually, he'll be the traditional fascist on the ticket that time.
And regardless, again, we have a system where criminal defendants get the defense lawyers who are going to try and argue on behalf of their clients, period.
You know, the last Judge Jackson left the Supreme Court to go to Nuremberg and prosecute the case against the Nazis. This Judge Jackson might have gone there to defend them. Judge Jackson.
Like a little laugh there as he delivers that almost.
Oh, he was excited.
It's insane too. And it's like the idea that like she would go and provide defense for criminal defendants.
If America was in a place where it could send a team of sort of black public defendants to represent the Nazis at Nuremberg, it would have been kind of a civilizational flex.
I think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's play Marsha Blackburn, just to give a sense of how of the lunacy that's involved in these Republicans as they put this up. This is Marsha Blackburn during the committee hearing.
So then I asked her a very simple question. I asked her to define the word woman. Wasn't a trick question. It's something that everybody learned in grade school science class. But Judge Jackson refused to answer. The fact that she couldn't or wouldn't answer that question speaks volumes.
Pause it for 1 second. If Marsha Blackburn was looking for an answer that was delivered in grade school biology,
why wouldn't she say vagina? I wanted her to say vagina.
It wouldn't. It is so clearly been a politicized that, of course, a judge is not going to answer on this. It would be absurd. And it's like baked into the premise of her comment here as to why she didn't answer.
Her response is perfectly adequate, which is that, like, if that ever comes up in a case, and for some reason, I would consult with experts on the topic.
Me that Judge Jackson is beholden to the radical left that is teaching our children that they can choose their own sex. It tells me that she is more committed to woke progressive ideology than she is to common sense and the rule of law. And it tells me that she will not be able to decide with impartiality the cases that are sure to come before her as a Supreme Court justice. How, for example, will Judge Jackson be able to resolve sex discrimination claims if she can't decide whether the parties before her are women? How can she decide Title IX cases if she doesn't even agree with Justice Ginsburg that there are enduring physical differences between men and women? We recently saw a Ninth Circuit judge issue a written opinion stating that, and I'm quoting, people of all genders can become pregnant, end quote. And disputes over biological males competing in women's sports are working their way through the federal courts. How can a Judge Jackson decide any of these issues as a Supreme Court justice if she is too afraid of the radical left to give this committee a definition of the word woman? Judge Jackson's refusal to answer my question underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive ideology that she endorses.
She is basing her entire broadside against a Supreme Court nominee on the potential of answering the question whether a trans woman or a trans man can participate in specific gendered sports.
And she's also basing her accusation against Ketanji Brown Jackson on a presumption that she's terrified of the radical left. In fact, she's more afraid of the fact that whatever answer she provides to you is going to be warped by you to say, well, she is a member of the radical left.
Yeah, of course. And like that type of rhetoric, we see all the time. But the idea that the conservative movement now seems to be pivoting on the existence of trans athletes in school sports as a governing sort of like philosophy. The Democratic Party should be pointing out that you want your problems dealt with, and this party is focusing on this. I mean, there is the failure to exploit this, and I am willing to bet everything I own that when it comes time to voting for Trump's next nominee on the Supreme Court, God forbid.
Oh my God.
You're going to see people like Dick Durbin and the 135-year-old Dianne Feinstein when she's sitting on the, I guess it would be 5 years from now, to be fair.
It doesn't matter. She's still 135.
She would, no, but at one point she will be, and she'll still be on that committee as far as she's concerned. They will cite Susan Collins and Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski voting for KBJ years before they cite Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Blackburn, and every other Republican who came out and said she's unqualified or
and Tom Cotton there is basically, it's like an old a racist trope to connect her with terrorists too. Let's be real there, right?
Of course.
As if Tom Cotton wouldn't, in that historical context, been entirely sympathetic with the Nazis. Let's be real.
Of course. And that's what the Democrats are going to do. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to Warren Hilsbos, organizer of West Virginia Rising, the Coal Baron Blockade of Granttown Power Plant. We'll be back in a second. Okay, we're back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Warren Hilsbos. He's an organizer with West Virginia Rising. They are doing well, why don't you tell us? It's happening on in 3 days. What is that? The Saturday.
Yeah. So April 9th, we're going to be having a Coal Baron Blockade at the Granttown Power, Virginia. Our intention is to show our plant outside of in significant numbers and express our outrage at the senator failing his duty to his constituents, his country, the world, to take the opportunity that his president, Joe Biden, offered the country to try to come up with a bipartisan Build Back Better plan to bring us out of this awful pandemic experience and begin to really build the infrastructure and human resources that we need to really thrive in the 21st century. Failing all of that to protect his own personal, corporate, and fossil fuel interests. He's left us all in the lurch, and there's lots of angry people, lots of disappointed people. And previous actions around the country in DC just haven't felt like personal enough that they're really singling him out as a key nexus of everything that's wrong with our country and our world. He's by no means alone, but he's really stood up to represent a certain strain of American thought that needs to be challenged.
So let me ask you this. There was this piece in the New York Times last week, I guess it was. And there's been reporting over the past several months by The Intercept that, all of this put together, it is just full on flabbergasting vision of total corruption and self-dealing that, I think the intersection of where he rose in state politics in West Virginia, and I'm sure West Virginia, this is a classic sort of this is what happens when you have these type of resources in a locality or whatnot, just breeds this type of corruption. But this is a guy who is completely self-dealing and making West Virginia energy consumers, I guess, pay for the fact that he's selling crappy coal to this power plant. How much of what you're doing is to bring, or let me ask you this. How much attention is there in West Virginia? How much understanding is there of what Joe Manchin did and continues to do to this day in terms of profiting off of not only the destruction of the planet, but also sort of charging his constituents for, he's getting a kickback from, it's so corrupt. I can't even wrap my head around it. How much of awareness is there in West Virginia of this?
Well, Sam, I honestly don't feel like there can ever really be enough awareness. But you might be surprised just how informed West Virginians really can be about, especially what's happening in their own backyards. It doesn't affect their lives, their livelihoods, their children's futures. And that's why so many people do care about it. But it's a difficult situation because West Virginia is resource rich, but that has unfortunately somewhat poor in principles, at least among our leaders. You don't go from being a U.S. senator in the carpet salesman to this kind of society without trying to break some rules and being able to get away with it. So what's really challenging, what we're really trying to fight, and notion we, the people, are limited in our power, that the system no longer really responds to us. And so we're trying to demonstrate, set a good example for our fellow West Virginians that we can, in fact, take our power back. And that's the number one thing we need to do that is to stand up, be heard, and say our piece, and to do it with principle. That the very thing lacking is the answer.
How much of what you're doing this weekend is geared towards getting the word out to West Virginians? Obviously, you guys don't have a TV station. I mean, the amount of media that's available to West Virginians, I would imagine, is fairly limited, and controlled and probably dominated by some fairly wealthy interests that I'm sure sort of got to go to these same people for whatever it is that they want, et cetera, et cetera. How do you guys get that information out there? Like specifically the information to West Virginians?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the first things to do is, West Virginians are still Americans. More and more of us have internet and cell phones, so like everyone else. Thing of a few years up to this is just how much, even in West Virginia, topics of conversation, the dynamic. That's the interesting mix of those conversations have reflected the wider country more and more and more. So we're turning to a lot of the same tools that you all using with internet tools of video conferencing, conversations, Twitter, Facebook, private messages amongst friend network, all of that sort of thing. And again, a lot of times the issue isn't just information; it's morale, it's vision, it's a belief again in principle and the value of standing up for that principle, whatever may come. So yeah, we just get out there and do the work, I guess, is the simple way to answer your question.
Where can people get more information and help with what you're doing?
If you don't mind me referencing my own device here, just to make sure I get it right. I'm not a pro at this by any means.
No worries.
Just doing my best, doing my
great.
part.
You're doing great.
Let's see here. I mean, you can certainly search West Virginia Rising Twitter. Thank you. Basically, if you can search West Virginia Rising on Twitter and Facebook, those are our two best places. From there, you can find the websites and that sort of thing. Gotta be willing to trust the people a little bit and put it in their hands.
Great. Well,
100%.
I appreciate it. Warren, good luck this weekend, and hopefully you get a lot of people out there. I hope you get some press attention down there too, so that people, and we've got it up, we'll pop this up on the screen right now, and people can go to westvirginiarising.org, because, there's got to be some pressure applied when you have this level of corruption. It's just sort of shocking, not to mention the implications for the rest of the country. But it would be nice if the media could assess what Joe Manchin is doing, not necessarily in terms of some type of so-called centrist ideology, but just this is sheer corruption and him just self-dealing and protecting his own interests at the expense of, I don't know, billions of people. But
yeah, and I think it's fair to point out right now, if you don't mind, Sam, that right now he's kind of doing it all over again. He got this started with an energy crisis back in the 80s over Saudi Arabia and OPEC. And now he's trying to go right back to the very same playbook right now with what's going on in Ukraine. Rather than using this as an opportunity to recognize our dependence on fossil fuels overall, he wants to frame this as a problem of being dependent on foreign sources of fossil fuels. He wants to bring that business back to America.
All right. Well, Warren Hilsbos, organizer of West Virginia Rising, really appreciate it. And thanks for coming on. I think we just lost Warren. We had a tough connection. All right, folks. Now it's time for the fun half. 646-257-3920. And head into the fun half. We will take your IMs. We will take your phone calls. Remind you, this show relies on your support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, free commercials, not only get the fun half, you not only get, we posted the live show, right? For members?
That'll be posted tonight. Sorry.
Okay. We're going to post the live show for members. Also, get bonuses like that every now and then. And you allow the show to survive and thrive. So join themajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget, Majority Live, Boston show. Still some tickets left, but they're going quick. Big surprise guest. We got some other guests, great guests too. Now, Sherry's going to be there. We're working on some other local folks. And then special guest. You'll have to find out. You have to go there to find out. And don't forget, you can join our Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, tonight, Wozni Lambre, people should know him, but he's also a basketball podcaster at The Ringer, joining us to talk about the player empowerment era, how the NBA owners attempt to keep control over their labor force through things like rookie rookie contracts, salary cap, and max contracts, has led to certain problems, like players realizing that they can take, like LeBron, take power into their own hands, and how that has impacted social justice, and why, despite this player empowerment era, there are still capitalists in charge of basketball teams. So check that out tonight, patreon.com/leftreckoning. We had a good discussion with Woz.
Nice.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomiki.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Who libertarians? They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. I can't figure out this IM that we got.
Okay, read it.
Is Quiera des mejor? Oh, wait. Is Quiera des mejor?
Izquierda es mejor.
Okay. Izquierda es mejor.
What does that mean?
I can't even read.
Left is
Like
best.
people don't understand. Oh, there's left at best.
Oh, they tried that with me yesterday, and I messed it up.
I can't half the time it takes me just on English words. Never mind Spanish words. It's impossible for me to do. Never did I think I would see the day this show would be interviewing Warren Hilsbos rather than Warren Hill. I don't know who Warren Hill.
So I just Googled it. Warren Hill is an alto saxophonist from Toronto, Canada. But he has an extensive.
Maybe the joke is about Hill's boss. I don't know. You guys really are turning into the mini MSDNC.
Wow, that's the joke. So Hills and Hill's boss, and we interviewed the boss. That is a very high joke. I think Izquierda es mejor is maybe
high joke or high joke.
A high joke, as in marijuana or
right. There we go.
Much respect to the organizer of that coal protest and everybody else trying to bring the people to Joe Manchin's door. Sometimes I just spend too much time trying to figure out what people are saying instead of just saying they don't know. It's not working.
I mean, Warren Hill, he was on Natalie Cole's album and he helped with the saxophone back in the day. Whatever happened to all the saxophone soloists from 80s and 90s songs? I hope that they're getting work elsewhere.
I don't know.
What are you two crazy bitches talking about?
Oh, God.
Someone tweeted at me that I was doing that laugh of yours, and I'm picking that up.
What?
Your little hee-hee thing.
Oh. All right, there you go. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm fine with it, I guess.
Here is Ben Shapiro. And I don't know. I think I might actually agree with this on some level. I think it's perfectly fine. Well, let's listen to Ben Shapiro opining on the KBJ interview. Excuse me, the KBJ nomination.
There have been times where I've taken unpopular positions in defense of sort of Mitt Romney. Not this time. So Mitt Romney, the senator from Utah, he came out and said that he would support Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court. He said, quote, "After reviewing Judge Jackson's record and testimony, I've concluded she's a well-qualified jurist and a person of honor. While I do not expect to agree with every decision she may make on the court, I believe she more than meets the standard of excellence and integrity. I congratulate Judge Jackson on her expected confirmation and look forward to her continued service to our nation." So here is the thing. Once the left has decided that they are openly just going to nominate political activists to positions of high power, no Republican should ever vote for a Democratic nominee.
I'll pause it for 1 second. I just want to remind everybody, KBJ has been has been a judge for almost a decade or more. It's stunning.
Like she's some Code Pink activist.
I mean, exactly. She has been on the court for a decade.
She's a member of Pussy Riot, didn't you know?
What's amazing to me about this is the ability, the failure of our media, and again, the failure of Democrats to put out enough information and to run a media narrative so that when someone says something that is so blatantly untrue, that it's quite obvious, and people go like that. Well, that's not true. I mean, I don't even have a problem with his premise, which is Republicans should not vote for a Democratic nominee, and Democrats should not vote for a Republican nominee.
That's pretty much what exists right now. If this was a vote that was closer, Susan Collins, Murkowski, and Romney would not be voting to put her over the finish line.
Or if it was tipping the balance of the court.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But go back a little bit. But it's just a blatant mischaracterization by the guy who's been dubbed by sort of
the New York Times, the cool kids philosopher.
Yes.
The
guy, and maybe that's the other part that I find so sort of galling, is the major media institutions of our country look at this guy as if he's like some type of intelligent and arbiter with some measure of integrity.
I mean, William F. Buckley Lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so artificial. It's just because of the way he speaks. It's really all they can hang their hat on in that area.
And he's extremely condescending.
Expecting
Intellectuals are
confirmation
that way.
and look forward to her continued service to our nation. So here is the thing. Once the left has decided that they are openly just going to nominate political activists to positions of high power, no Republican should ever vote for a Democratic nominee to the high court. Not unless that person can somehow demonstrate that they are not beholden to the far left. This woman said in a confirmation hearing she does not know what a woman is. I'm sorry, the answer is no. The answer is no. And Mitt Romney, for all of his comedy, compliance in the Senate, has won how many friends over from the Democratic side of the aisle? And what has he accomplished that requires him here to back Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court of the? I know it's Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and Mitt Romney, and you knew they were going to vote for Ketanji Brown Jackson. Let's just say that he is living in an era that does not exist, where Ketanji Brown Jackson should be on the Supreme Court. Frankly, that era has not existed since Roe versus Wade. As soon as the politicization of the Warren Court became completely overt, and really since the takeover of the Supreme Court by FDR pressure in the 1940s, the Supreme Court has been a tool for the left. And the attempt to turn the Supreme Court back into an august institution in American life has been somewhat of a joke. So no points to Mitt Romney for all of this. With that said,
okay, I just want to remind you what the august institution of the Supreme Court did before the 1940s. All right? Jim Crow laws. They allowed for the disenfranchisement of poor people and black people from voting. They would not allow for child labor laws. They would not allow for a 40-hour work week. They would not probably have allowed for Social Security to exist.
They said racial segregation was constitutional.
Yeah, all the Jim Crow laws.
Okay. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
yes. I mean, that is what the august institution that he was referring to prior to 1940. I mean, it is the year 2022.
That is straight from, like, you hear listen to the Nixon tapes and Nixon talk about the Warren Court, and that is just a straight line from exactly what Nixon and his aides were talking about.
And you don't hear I don't even know what the name of the court was during those years, where the Jim Crow years. And incidentally, and it was FDR wasn't pressuring because of Jim Crow laws. Those Jim Crow laws stuck around for another 4 decades, 3 decades, 2 decades, I guess, 65.
And frankly, the Democratic Party could have used more of the way that FDR was aggressive in attempting to get the court to represent and back his interests.
But the idea that, like, child labor laws, 40-hour work weeks, the idea of any type of worker protections, the idea that, like, there was any rights to privacy, the idea that courts should defer to federal agencies, the idea that Congress had the right to delegate its authority to executing statutes. All of this was what changed when FDR basically threatened to court pack. And so this guy wants to return to that era. It's just amazing. And he just walks around like he's a normal person.
Yeah. It's like Peter Thiel saying, like, women's suffrage kind of really mucked things up a little bit for us.
Stunning. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 920 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? No, 920.
Love the show, guys. Let me take you up on here. Yeah, so I had a question about.
Dude, it's really hard
to
to listen to you, man, because it's so much static. If you have us on Bluetooth headphones or something like that.
Geez, I don't. I took them off.
All right, just say quick. Just quick. Be quick.
Yeah. Accountability. What do we do? What does this world look like if we actually start holding presidents accountable for, like, I'm referencing that report that came out about how Trump most likely committed crimes, and I say, sure, yeah, let's do it. But in all reality, he's probably not going to spend any time in jail or anything. Or if he does, then the right is going to want to go after Clintons, which so be it. I say fucking whatever, lock them all up. But
All right.
what is this?
All right, we're gonna let you go. So we get okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So the question is that, what the rule of law is under siege here. It was hard for me to listen, honestly.
I think the idea is that how do we hold? Well, why don't we hold? How do we hold presidents accountable? Yes, I believe that we should hold all presidents accountable.
But this is, I think, less of a new phenomenon than maybe it's presented right now.
I mean, look, every time we have a system of government which requires the opposition party to be in opposition, and we have had for decades now a party that has refused to participate in that program, and one that has participated in that program much more vigorously than is probably healthy. But it's worse when the dynamic is so out of kilter. So when you look at Iran-Contra, when you look at the savings and loans crisis, when you look at, even Watergate for that matter, when Nixon was allowed to basically get apart, there was nothing that you could do with Ford except for maybe put out and make it clear like this was going to be incredibly damaging. When you look at allowing the bankers prosecuting no one in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. So this is a both party issue. When you don't hold these people accountable, it gets worse each time. When Barack Obama came into the White House and said, we got to turn the page and ignore the very recent history of things like torture regime, lying into a war, the massive amounts of fraud that existed in the banking industry. How do you expect Donald Trump to be held accountable for his petty corruption? Every time a president gets in or a party gets in and says, we're going to turn the page. Nancy Pelosi bragging. People wanted to impeach George W. Bush, and I stopped it. Bragging about that. That's why you get this. And the people who complain about the lack of accountability in the past, but then we're like, so why should we hold Trump accountable? Have it exactly backwards. You hold Trump accountable so that the next president, whether they're Democratic or Republican, or the next scandal is also held to account. That's why. Calling from a 718 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hi, this is Dustin from Queens.
Dustin from Queens, what's on your mind?
So, I was just sort of just wondering, why aren't the Democrats invested in government-funded public housing as much as they used to? Because it feels to me that a great way to sort of really populate their cities in blue states and add more House seats in their blue states and really take more control in the House, because I really don't see any way they can take the House back the way things are going. So I'm just curious as to why.
That's not a constituency. Great points, but the Democrats are not wired in this current iteration of their party to look out for and also appeal to poor people. They're
appealing to real estate interests more than that.
And suburban upper middle class donors. That seems to be the direction that they've decided to go in. And they're like, we talk about how leadership is just ancient at this point, but they're still living in the era when public housing was a dirty word. And they feel like they can't politically take the hit for advocating for such a position, because that's, again, not the constituency they're appealing to anymore. But the idea that we haven't had federal funding for public housing in decades and decades is an atrocity. And that's, that's a huge problem. So point well taken.
I would also I would also say though there's two things about your premise that I think is wrong. One is that Democrats do things to increase their political power when they get into office. They don't. I mean, forget about actually like appropriating money for public housing. They don't do the most basic of stuff that wouldn't cost a dime to enhance their political power. They none of that. The PRO Act even would we know greater union density helps Democrats. Whatever it is, voting rights, whatever it is. But then on top of that, I'm not convinced that what you're suggesting would add to their would add from a congressional standpoint, because a lot of times you already have a majority of Democrats in urban areas, and so
They take those populations for granted. That's a huge part of it too.
well, but my point being that if you were to increase Democratic leaning constituents within urban areas, you would actually diminish their ability to, on a congressional level. Now, the one thing I will say is this: I'm quite convinced that the Democrats are going to lose the House in 2022, but in terms of the way that the seats have been drawn, it's probably as close. It's probably much more balanced in 2022 than it was in 2010, because contingent upon some court cases, because people became so attuned to that you had blue states essentially do the same redistricting tricks that was being done in red states, at least on a federal level.
And we should also say that there are Democrats who have advocated for these things. Bernie and AOC tried to include public housing in like the Green New Deal part of like as Build Back Better was being negotiated. So that was around a year ago. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but there is a glimmer of hope of at least some members of our government who understand the necessity of public housing.
Well, I just have like a quick question though. So, and this goes back to what Sam said about diminishing. Say like, New York City, raised wages, provided more train lines, way more public housing, built in areas that, if you've been around New York City, there are some areas where there's not like Williamsburg, and it looks like, or Long Island City or Manhattan, and it's a lot of, single family zoning or just one story commercial real estate, like, say Whitestone or College Point or so. But basically say that they decided, you know what, we want to increase our congressional footprint and we want to make things better in blue cities and blue states, and advertise in red states where really bad stuff's happening. I mean, let's say advertise in Oklahoma where they just passed an almost complete abortion ban, and they said, listen, come over here, we've got all this to offer you. And they did this to deep red states that had more than one House seat. And they said, come over here, and they essentially like incentivize people to leave. Democratic voters, I guess, I mean, the Republican voters are going to come here in droves, but they brought them there, and people left, and they went here, and we added a couple of seats. Wouldn't that sort of help though?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you could get mass migration from Oklahoma to New York State, I mean, yes, I guess it would help in that regard. It would be.
It's difficult to
long-term project
to ask people to uproot their lives.
I mean, frankly, I think the opposite is probably better. If you want to talk about political power, just sheerly because you still have those people in Oklahoma still have 2 senators,
right?
And so I think what is a better project is to try and find maybe a blue district in in a purple state or a red state, and get people to move there, and diminish the overrepresentation on a Senate level. I mean, but I think all of that is that seems like a very, very a protracted move. But I appreciate the call, Dustin. That reminds us of something here. Eric Adams, and like I don't even buy this. I just simply don't buy it. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, has decided to launch an ad campaign denouncing Florida's Don't Say Gay legislation in Florida.
I was just flummoxed.
I'm just completely. Do we have any sound on this? Is he announcing, or is it just that image?
I think just an article.
But
he did this in between, popping bottles with Cara Delevingne at a credit card launch for a Wells Fargo card that you could just pay rent on.
Oh my God, is that true?
Yes, he was the other day at a big party with models and like musical artists and stuff at a club, literally popping bottles at a launch for a Wells Fargo credit
Poppin'
card.
Bottles a club name?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, like champagne bottles. Okay, I got you. Look, I'm like you said, popping bottles of Caravine, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell you just talking about.
Caravine. We talked about this also. Like we've talked about this before. This exact story.
Popping bottles?
No.
Well, I've heard the story, but I
Cara
didn't.
Delevingne.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
She's a model. Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a place too.
Jesus.
So wait a sec. So Eric Adams is there with. Oh, okay. She was the one who was dancing in that video.
Yes. So
okay.
he's doing like he said, I'm gonna come to New York, I'm gonna bring swagger back, and so it's just his policies are like Bloomberg's, but he's demented in a way that maybe is almost Trumpian.
The idea that we are spending tax dollars on billboards in Florida to remind Floridians that New York is hospitable to LGBTQ people, and they're going to move back to New York. I don't even believe that he believes this.
No, he doesn't. He
This is
probably
just-
had a few wealthy friends and like real estate developer friends that in the pandemic moved down to Miami, and he was like, this is a big problem. We need to bring people back to the city as rent prices are skyrocketing right now.
I don't even think that's
we
it.
need less people in the city.
I don't even think that's it. I think this is his way of appealing to a constituency in New York City that he wants to shore up. And it's basically a way of spending city taxpayer dollars on placating, not even placating. I mean, just appealing to a narrow set of big donors, as opposed to taking that money. And I don't know how many homeless people, I don't know how much that costs. But if there was one homeless person who could have gotten housing for what we're spending on billboards in Florida. And frankly, if I'm Governor DeSantis for that matter, it's like the best. You're going to have Eric Adams endorse an anti, some campaign against this legislation. Thank you. I couldn't have paid for that.
New York liberals telling us how to live down here in Florida.
And they want our degenerates to move back up there. Sure.
Right. New York black mayor telling
Exactly.
New York City black mayor telling us what we should be doing in Florida. I mean, for him, that's a godsend. So I just think like it's absurd. It's absurd.
We got a little bit of audio from the announcement.
Oh, good.
You know how you can live in a comfortable setting and not be harassed, not be abused, not only as adults, but also as young people. And so I'm the mayor of this city, the city of the LGBTQ plus community, as we see people in government and out of government understanding how your voice is respected here in the city. And that's what this movement of Don't Say Gay is about.
How about the voices of the disproportionately gay and trans homeless population here in the city and actually across the country? Because often they're kicked out of their homes due to the issues that he is touching on there. But instead, we have a mayor who is in the morning, in the AM, breaking up homeless encampments, and in the evening going out to the club. I mean, that is the Eric Adams' experience here in New York City, plus just the pro real estate, pro industry, pro capitalist turn or just like philosophy that he embodies as well.
I mean, credit to him for holding a press conference about it. Credit for him for making a press conference and saying, just a reminder, we welcome people, but putting up 4 billboards in Florida can be a break.
We don't welcome people, though.
This movement of don't say gay.
If you got the money, yeah, we're fine. If you're an upper middle class LGBTQI person.
People in government and out of government understanding how your voice is respected here in the city. And that's what this movement of don't say gay is about. This political showmanship of attempting to demonize a particular group or community is unacceptable. And we are going to loudly show our support and say to those who are living in Florida, listen, we want you here in New York. We want you right here in New York City. And it's more than just saying that. It's also standing up and aligning ourselves with the men and women of the LGBTQ plus community and stating that we are in unison with you in your right to have self-identification, your right to be live the lifestyle and live the lives that you choose to live without any form of harassment.
All right. I mean,
except for harassment by the cops, them going to deploy to the homeless encampments.
I can't believe it. Anyways, here's Eric Bolling on Newsmax speaking about this move by Eric Adams to have ads in Florida. And again, it's just impossible to find anybody in this entire sort of like back and forth who's not being incredibly self-serving. I mean, it really is just sort of stunning. Never seen so much talk about one thing that had so little to do with helping anybody involved.
It's just a vehicle to center oneself.
That's
all. Like,
and one's campaign sort of priorities.
It's like it's almost like watching like a game of tennis. With LGBTQ people, but they're not even the tennis ball in this. Like they're so removed from.
They're the net.
Like it's not. It's like they're almost just like they're not scheduled to be on this court today.
Is this the New York City you want those Floridians to move to? Is this a New York City to be proud of, to be loud of, to bring victims to? And you know what else is still allowed in New York City, thanks to Eric Adams? Kids aged 2 to 4 forced to wear masks. Forced. All while he dances.
Pause it for 1
maskless.
second. This is just so deranged too. First off, it's just a series of Eric Bolling going, is this the New York City you want people to move to? It's just a picture of a black mayor. And that's it. And then he goes, go back. He goes like, kids forced to wear masks. And he shows a picture of a teacher with a mask on and a kid who does not have a mask. And then he goes on to say, kids 2 to 5 need to wear masks, but the mayor is willing to dance without a mask. There's a thing called vaccination. And when adults get vaccinated, as the mayor surely is, and particularly when they've been boosted, the chance of them ending up in a hospital with COVID is severely diminished. But what has happened over the past couple of months is that the number of children under the age of 5 who have wound up in the hospital has shot up because they are unvaccinated, because there is no vaccination for kids that age. And because we are living life as if COVID doesn't exist, we are exposing them much more to COVID and they're getting more sick. And that is why. I mean, it's like, how does Eric Bolling not know this? Or how does he know this and continue to like push this stuff when you like watching kids this age go into the hospital more? And
the mask mandate for those kids, last month, Eric Adams says he's ending it in a few weeks at the end of April.
Which is the real horror show. Honestly, they should not be doing that.
City, thanks to Eric Adams, kids aged 2 to 4 forced to wear masks.
Until the end of April.
All while he dances maskless next to a supermodel at a party. Where's your mask, Eric? A reminder that half of New York City moved down to Florida to escape crazy levels of crime and COVID dictatorship. People down in Florida enjoy no taxes, year-round sun, a low cost of living, and what a tax is Eric Adams even thinking about? The gay community practically invented Florida, and they thrive there, have for years. But sure, they should have, behind that come up here because of surging violent crime, drugs, gangs, homelessness, an extremely high cost of living, and draconian COVID restrictions like masking up 2-year-olds.
But I'm convinced that Eric Adams buys some of that stuff. That there's been some sort of flight away from New York and you got to bring back the city. That's why he said those things about.
Oh, I think there has been some flight from New York City, without a doubt.
Early retirements, but also just like particularly wealthy people in the city who
move into the burbs
are going to move either to the suburbs or to a warmer area, and maybe they're 60 years old, early retirement, that kind of thing. These are the people that Eric Adams has drinks with, and these are the people that Eric Bolling has drinks with.
Listen, without a doubt, there has been some flight from New York City because during a pandemic, if you have the ability to leave a place where there's a high density of people, people tend to do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, there is nobody who is leaving because their 2-year-old has to wear a mask in school.
Oh, they're refugees.
Right. There's nobody who's leaving because of that reason. It's just, it's so twisted. I can't even, it's just, they put up the graphic of how much Fox News has been talking about ivermectin over the past 2 years. I know the other day you talked about this study. There has been study after study after study that is providing now conclusive evidence that ivermectin does not in any way help you deal with a coronavirus infection. And the danger of this, of promoting a false remedy, is that it creates conspiracy-minded people. It creates people who refuse to actually get real treatment for their COVID, and they die.
Yeah, it leads people down, a medical route of action that leads them to be less protected than they should be, and they die.
And even as early as, or as recently as last night, they were allowing casual ivermectin sort of promotion. Play this clip of Tucker Carlson and the odious Stephen Miller on Tucker's show. The idea that you can be associated with anything. I mean, I don't even care. Like, I don't even know like how you could be associated with like a sitcom that would promote ivermectin, never mind a supposed news outlet.
Our politicians are telling doctors what medical care to provide?
Well, it's a great point. And here's another wrinkle. For 2 years, we were lectured, you can't give people hydroxychloroquine. You can't give them ivermectin. These have not gone through randomized controlled clinical studies for the application to COVID. Never mind, they've been around for 4 decades and the side effects are minimal. Tucker, the use of testosterone to change someone's gender is off label. Doctors are being forced to use.
So of course they're talking about, attacking transgender people because it's the only thing that you can hear on the right. But Tucker's just laughing away as Stephen Miller just tells a blatant lie that there have been, in fact, plenty of very definitive studies now involving ivermectin. And they're still complaining. And the side effects are not, I've taken the ivermectin and I'm not, I'm not dying. The side effects are, I'm refusing to take anything else except for ivermectin.
Yeah.
That's what the side effect is. And so regardless, like you're a right winger who's pushing this stuff, or you're somebody who's saying like, free speech is being inhibited because people aren't allowed to promote ivermectin as a solution. Like how you're not spending the rest of your days simply writing about how you got it wrong and how
Yeah.
And reminder, I know I'm writing about something different today, or I'm talking about something different, but I just want to remind everybody that it turns out, yes, ivermectin,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Here's a
because someone's
correction.
suppressing ivermectin. It's because there was no evidence that it was working, and it was dangerous to promote the idea that it was.
Yeah, if you happen to trust all the charlatans that I laundered as free speech activists, turns out that what they were saying about ivermectin is untrue, and you should go get your ass vaccinated. That would be the responsible thing to say.
Yes.
Yeah, but also like no, can you just put up, we can just pause it, if you could just put up the graphic that they have down there, which Stephen Miller conflates, like the chyron here on the screen. DOJ says states can't block kids from getting puberty blockers. That's pretty much the same policy with ivermectin. Doctors were still prescribing ivermectin during the pandemic, despite the fact that we did not have definitive evidence about its efficacy. And now a large clinical trial out of Brazil says it has no effect on hospitalization. Doesn't matter.
Well, I was just gonna say. So again, this is projection. This
Yeah.
is they want to do to like medications trans people rely on what they claim was done to ivermectin.
Right. This is actual doctor and patient freedom that is being promoted by the Department of Justice. What they say that they're supposed to do, that they're supposed to be in favor of, the fact that a parent and a child can go to a doctor and make a determination about their child's health and whether or not they want to use puberty blockers or hormones. That is the exact thing they're supposed to be advocating for with ivermectin, and yet they use a double negative there in the chyron to kind of throw you off the scent.
All right, let's go to the IMs. Talia from Tampa. Hey, I'm our crew. Wanted to give an update on Florida's Don't Say Gay law and the story that's started this whole movement. CNN did an excellent fact check breaking down how DeSantis and the mom involved lied about her child being indoctrinated. Very basically, the mom told the school something along the lines of, "We won't affirm our teen at home, but we won't stop you from affirming them. You do what you think is right, or let my child handle it." The school worked with the student to create an entire support plan. The mom sued because she wanted all the details from the school about the support plan. CNN does a better job of explaining it, but wanted to make sure you knew about it. Had not seen that.
Yeah, what was the name of the woman? I wrote that down, but forgot to look it up. What? Can you look it up, Bradley? Little John was her last name, right? Lil Jon. Yes, I remember because Matt Binder did a Lil Jon voice. All right.
Sneering atheist. Starbucks on Charlotte Street is organizing a union. Okay. I read that one already, and I've been told it's a joke. Sam from Ottawa tested positive for COVID for the first time since this all started. Not so coincidentally, following the first weekend we went shopping since Ontario lifted its mask mandates, entering our 6th wave. Oy. Adam B29, suggestion for Emma Majority Thursday. Have Brandon and Matt in studio. We're getting closer.
Maybe.
We're not really actually set up for that now anymore.
No, we almost had Brandon come in a few weeks ago, and it was just too confusing.
We need to figure this out. Anodyne Q9. Do you think the Supreme Court will kill Chevron deference before the midterm elections? I don't know if there's a case that specifically is there that they would be able to do that before then, but it's happening. Emma, yesterday with Nomi, holding back smiles was a perfect way to describe the Jesse Waters, Tucker Carlson energy when they confronted with the relationship between the absurdity of who they are trying to peddle and the stupidity of an audience that's likely to buy it. For this, AOC is a win-win for Fox. They can feed their Viagra demo photos of her looking awesome, at the same time give obedient, unwoke women of the right an opportunity to hate on her for it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been there. They've been doing this for decades, demonizing young women, essentially. And then, and women of color. Not my Pope. A most pleasant hump day to you all. Oh, we didn't even make a big deal of that.
It's hump day.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I recommend having Kate Bosler on the show. She's an environmental journalist who's been closely following the developments out at the Thacker Pass lithium mining site in Nevada. There's been a lot of negative journalism coming out against the leaders of one of the groups organizing out there, and I don't want to give a superficial summary for fear of misrepresenting the truth. But this mine is at the forefront of larger mineral mining operations that will start up in the coming years, especially after Biden said he'd exercise the Defense Production Act for exactly this sort of thing. You got that, Kate Bosler? Caytebosler. Aaron is not cool. Hate to say it, but the stunt by Adams is going to be praised by the establishment Democrats. We have our own DeSantis now. Yes, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, look, there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to have Democrats praise it. You're going to have organizations that are going to praise it. There's no doubt in my mind. I have no doubt that there's LGBTQ organizations that will praise it. Nevertheless, it's tax dollars, and it is in no way going to, the idea that these billboards are down there going to influence anything.
But this is his MO, right? He did those like weird instructional videos. Did you ever see those when he was a Brooklyn rep? What was it, Bradley?
Borough president?
Yeah,
yeah.
president, where he would go into how to find drugs in your teen's room, and he would like he loves these PR exercises designed to appeal directly to people that, I mean, he thinks those have a ton of salience. I don't know.
And I guess the theory is, in the New York media market, it's going to raise awareness of the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. But I'm sorry, I just don't buy it as a valid expenditure of tax dollars that could be spent on more pressing problems in New York City. Change my diaper. Sam, Emma, how do you think progressive left should cover the story and understand what's in the Hunter Biden story? Much more is coming out than was shared during election campaigning. There's possible tax evasion, collusion with Chinese companies, and bribery allegations, and the possibility of giving kickbacks to Biden, to Hunter Biden, or to Joe Biden. Look, I think if there's evidence that Hunter Biden committed a crime, then he should be prosecuted. I think it was well known that Hunter Biden was getting money for sitting on all these boards because his last name was Biden.
Yeah.
That was, as far as I can tell, widely known. There is no evidence that I've seen in the Hunter Biden emails that Joe Biden was getting any money. B, Joe Biden was just a citizen at that point. In 2012, when was this? In 2016, right? Did people think that Joe Biden was going to be president? I thought Joe Biden was done. When we were even talking about Joe Biden in like 2017, 2018, we're like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Now, there's no doubt that there's nepotism issues, but there's, as far as I can see, like, this idea that it would have impacted the campaign, I think is absurd.
I mean, there's a whole culture out there that wants this to be viewed as a partisan issue. And I think the only interesting actual angle to it is a class issue, right? Like, this is like how children of rich, powerful people that move through the world. And like, I'm down to look at that, but it's like the same stuff applies for the Trump kids, in my opinion. And
except for the only differential would be
Trump was actually president.
That Trump was president while these kids were doing it.
Right.
They were doing it in official capacity. And I'm not convinced that, a 10-minute speech by Joe Biden talking about his son having drug problems and being wayward, trading on the Biden name to fund his, his drug problems wouldn't have gained him votes. Who knows? But like this idea that
Well, yeah, that's another thing is they like to say the election was stolen because of how the media
Right.
processed that, because that allows you to join in with the big lie folks
Yeah.
in a sort of a safer way, say a civil libertarian approved way.
I mean, in many respects, it's an attempt to mirror image the Clinton campaign. Except for what we do know is that we have actual data. We don't have to come up with a counterfactual. We can look at the polls and see the implications of James Comey talking about this, or how the emails operated. We can actually look at it. Again, normal caveat. I think there are about a dozen other things that were more important in determining that election. But
And I think people were appropriately, outside of like the Fox News circles, turned off by what felt icky about going after Hunter Biden, for who clearly had issues. And there wasn't the groundwork laid for years and years and years by Fox, which they did with Hillary Clinton,
right,
that they could make this a quick switch, because to make this effective, the Bidens would have already had to been demonized. But when you're just thrusting it upon people, it looks like a guy who lost his son, and then his other son has a bunch of issues, and we're going to make a huge stink about that. Like, outside the Fox crowd, I think it's hard to make it stick.
And then we got the same question in different wording from another IM right after that. Whatever. District Jabroni. America cares so much about war crimes. Our last president made sure to pardon people convicted of them. Yeah, exactly. Bernadette. I'm so ashamed of my countrymen. There are numerous reports of Ukrainian women in Norway getting unwanted attention. Police are patrolling refugee centers to keep Norwegian men from trying to prey on vulnerable women. One case of sexual assault has made national news. What the F is wrong with our people?
I mean, I'm sorry.
It's a horrible situation. Like a lot of people are really vulnerable because you have people taking in people from Ukraine, and some of those people are unscrupulous or predatory.
Yep, taking advantage.
And we should be doing more here.
Yeah.
North Dakota Llama. Marsha Blackburn is a moron. KBJ gave the most lordly answer she could in what she said. It depends. Blackburn doesn't realize that's not the job of a justice to already have an answer in mind, but to hear the arguments and come to a conclusion based on those arguments. She's a moron, but she's also, this is willful ignorance in that situation.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is you got to give me the context in what you're talking about.
Anybody who's a little bit confused on this point, USA Today has a good article by Aliyah Destagier. Marsha Blackburn asked Ketanji Brown Jackson to define woman. Science says there's no simple answer. And here's just one paragraph. There isn't one single biological answer to the definition of a woman. There's not even a singular biological answer to the question of what is a female, Jordan Young said, one of the biologists you're talking to. There are at least 6 different biological markers of sex, quote unquote, in the body: genitals, chromosomes, gonads, internal reproductive structures, hormone ratios, and secondary sex characteristics. None of the 6 is strictly dichotomous, Jordan Young said, and the different markers don't always align. I mean, you know, what we all know, but what people need to know.
And then you sort of like take one step up from that, where it's a question of within the context of a legal question. Because it's completely irrelevant what a Supreme Court justice thinks about from a biological standpoint, because these are all legal questions. And there's no, like, what does the definition of dead mean? Well, I think I know what it means, but it's not the same necessarily in the context of a legal question.
Right. When your heart stops beating, but that could mean that, you know, it could be temporarily not beating for 2-3 minutes. Or
yes, if your heart if your heart stops beating, am I required to revive you or attempt to revive you? Why? You're dead. I mean, like there's different, but aside from the sort of the strictly scientific versions of what constitutes a woman or a man for that matter, from a legal perspective, it's also very different. What about like a woman is an adult female in the sort of like the dictionary definition? What constitutes an adult? Is it voting? Are you an adult when you're allowed to vote, or consent to sex? Or when you can be charged for murder as an adult?
Or when you can drink.
Or when you can drink? Or is it movies? Or do we simply go by, if you're Jewish, it's when you're 13 if you get bat mitzvah.
If you're, a cis woman, it's when you get your period.
I mean, honestly, like this is there, and again, Marsha Blackburn, who knows if she knows or cares? It's all for political, it's a political tactic, all well and good. But if you know anybody in your life who actually thinks they're being smart by saying, you can't even define what a woman is.
They're being a fundamentalist.
Yeah, Matt, can you text me whatever you just read from? I just want to have that.
Let's post that in the show notes. That link to that USA Today. Rabbit from Boston. After hearing about the AOC crystal ball beef yesterday, it made me so happy I'm off that hell site named Twitter. I've been logged off for 2 months now. Honestly, it's been very good for me. I never thought being on Twitter had made me more upset or anxious than normal, but you start to hear about things and live life at a different speed. I would recommend it to anybody. I think there's a lot of value in that. If I didn't pull stories from there, I would not, because it is so easy to get caught up in look, there's some real world value to Twitter insofar as you're influencing people who are creating the media narrative, which influences our society. But it's also very easy to get caught up, and certainly I have as a participant. Part of it is like it's fun, but in like little Twitter flame wars that really don't have the salience outside of Twitter that one would think.
Yeah.
Project.
Like I use Twitter to ruin people's day. I try not to let my day get ruined.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sam was saying you should start a consulting business on how to appropriately react to others on Twitter.
Exactly.
I mean, you do have that down. I'm trying to learn.
Project Un-F the World. Emma, Chicago deep dish is divinely glorious. That was madness. Stop the cap.
Well, Sam, what do you think about it?
I look.
I think we discussed this on the day you weren't here, and so you escaped the wrath.
Oh, I mean, who does not like a slab of semi-cooked dough with red sauce on it?
What are you saying? You guys are nuts.
Listen, I like.
It's not even red sauce on it. It's like red sauce pooled inside of it.
Yeah, pooled inside of it. I like melted cheese. So I guess in that sense, is it pizza? I mean, some people call it that.
Yes, indeed. Boo. Yes, indeed. Hiss.
Well, it's quite clear where Matt is on this.
We had a bit of a spirited debate before
We
the
had
show.
a big debate before the show.
Sam is toning down his rhetoric, being a politician, trying to appeal to the audience.
I'm being a little bit soft on this. I mean, and then I found out you
like
can't
that
even
damn dough.
You can't even get a single slice. Is that really true? Oh, because it's not really a slice. It's like in the same way. Well, I guess cake can be in a slice, but
but a cake has more structure than this
that's true.
deep dish.
That's true.
It's like a pie that's not even fully formed.
Listen. One of my favorite treats going to like a county fair or something like that, or a carnival, is fried dough. And it's like fried dough without the crispiness and without it being cooked in some way. And then also
really messy.
Yeah, really messy and inundated with spaghetti sauce. So what's not to love?
You people are everything that you come to hate. You know that?
Oh my God. I still,
Sister
that
Act,
line,
Sister
that
Act
line
too.
still sort of like, I still like can't quite get over what that line was about. On some level, like, I wonder if he's not just talking to himself.
Yeah.
BB and Teach.
That's so dark.
How much do things really cost? Great New Yorker article. Fits with some of the palm oil discussion. Ryan in Los Angeles. When Tom Cotton gets caught in a motel room high on bath salts with an undergrad sheep he transported across state lines for immoral purposes, you know he'll be grateful for lawyers who defend clients no matter what their crime. Tom from Tom from Yakubia. Tom, thank you so much for the cookies. By the way, Brett Kavanaugh refused to answer half of the questions put to him regarding Christine Blasey Ford, of course. A Square, Sam, glad to hear Saul is okay. Of all these nuts, Tom Cotton, I think, is the most dangerous. Yes. I agree. Emma, sorry for confusing IM yesterday. Was going for two topics, Disney and transphobia. So there's here's only one, the one only.
Okay.
The increase in transphobia in this country is disgusting, but it's also being used to divide the LGBTQ community as historically because there's been tension in the gay community on visibility and acceptance of trans people.
Yes.
For reference for audience, the TV series Pose does a good job showing some of this history and the struggle for acceptance and bigotry.
I want to watch that. I mean, there is like a brand of like I've read. I don't know enough about this, but some parts of the lesbian community have like been a little bit more turfy, and there's been some back and forth and. Yeah,
well, I mean, J.K. Rowling's trying to lead a movement,
right? And I think that's where I saw some of that, but she's right.
Prairie Fire Kowalski, 2 million Democrats moving into the Great Plains would be enough to win 14 Senate seats. Howdy, Emma, MR Crew, and Sam. Sam, I hope your household's health is doing better. Thank you. It is. Your interview today reminded me of the destruction of the rainforest that occurred as a result of the 2012 super drought, especially in Brazil. Basically, prices skyrocketed due to a sharp drop in supply. That made it economically viable to slash and burn the forest for soybean and cattle production in the Amazon. I'd like to point out this happened after Lula was out of office and the country was under a massive assault by the U.S. economic interests, mostly oil interests, through some big agricultural too. Brazilian environmentalists were in weak position, but that situation is changing. Lula is currently leading in the polls and has always had good policies when it comes to this conversation, indigenous rights. So even with the current situation creating these incentives, as long as the Workers' Party wins this big this year, we'll likely see massive deforestation. This is in our interest in the United States, since rainfall in the Southwest is closely tied to the health of the Amazon rainforest. Palm oil has been illegally developed in Indonesia, and the central government can't seem to rein it in. Same is true of other cash crops in the Congo rainforest.
Was that Kowalski?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was going to say Kowalski's been talking about that. Yeah, I mean, Lula's good on this stuff. There's an article from The Guardian, Amazon rainforest will collapse if Bolsonaro remains president. And here's just a paragraph. Amazon deforestation reduced 80% between 2004 and 2012 under the Workers' Party administration of Lula da Silva. Bolsonaro has steadily dismantled or discredited the mechanisms that achieved that: satellite monitoring, personnel on the ground, and legislation to push offenders and demarcate indigenous land and conservation areas.
And Kowalski says, Chicago style is the pizza of the Midwest. When we need the energy to throw a sheet of plywood up on the roof of a 3-story building, when you're looking for a little caloric firepower, not a little slice of triangle cheese. And there you have it.
You guys can call it pizza if it's lasagna, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's lasagna pie.
Real Ace Attorney. Emma is a fellow Giants fan. I'm curious to know your ideal picks at 5 and 7 are in the event that we don't trade down.
And if we don't trade down, which is I think my first preference given the deal, I want maybe it's not realistic for Kayvon Thibodeau to fall, but I would love like a pass rusher and a right tackle. So I like Ike Ekwonu a lot as an athletic right tackle, although I don't know. I mean, it would depend and see how Andrew Thomas progresses. Any of those tackles, Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu or Kayvon Thibodeau, and I'm kind of falling a little bit in love with Travon Walker out of Georgia. Really a huge freak. I also all right, last one. Jermaine Johnson, edge rusher out of Florida State, also very exciting prospect. So I guess those are 5 options I'd be happy with.
But you haven't really contemplated it too much.
I haven't thought about it now. That's my late night activity on my computer. I'll do those. This is embarrassing. I'll play with that PFF mock draft simulator and I'll just do it the whole first round by myself. It's like really just
Jesus.
Pathetic.
This is a fun moment. It is completely apropos of nothing, but this is Mike Lindell's world now. And so much so that like he has been waiting for this moment. This is what's so great about this video. It's completely, like it is largely totally irrelevant, but I have to, it's just, I found it fascinating because you realize that Mike Lindell has been waiting for this moment for an extended period of time. He has consulted with his insane lawyers about this moment for an extended period of time. And just in the moment, he forgets to do what he was supposed to do, and he blows it, which is don't take anything from anybody when you're in public, because you're going to get sued, and you know you're going to get sued. So don't grab anything, because I think this is from, is he getting sued by Dominion here? Is that what this is? Or do we know? Okay, but here it is. Watch Mike Lindell. He walks off the stage or wherever he's walking around the Colorado State Capitol, probably trying to suss out, where the Germans hid the ballots on the server. And here it is. Watch this guy right there with the yellow jacket. Just hands it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for everything.
He realized he shouldn't have taken it.
Sir, what is this? It's for you. Okay, well, what is it? It's not for me. It's not for me. It's for you. Hey, I need you to open it. That is a document. Oh, it is.
Sorry.
There it is. It's a defamation suit from a former Dominion employee.
Yes.
And the process server is there in the yellow coat, and he hands it to him. And as soon as Lindell takes it, and I would imagine, I think it's his, probably. I don't know who took the video, but I suspect it. As soon as he takes it. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
who is
Watch
that
this.
guy?
Okay. So he looks at it, he takes it, and go ahead, keep going slowly.
Thank you, Mike.
And he's like, wait. Oh, wait. I shouldn't take this. And then we keep going. And then he goes,
Thank you for everything.
I can't take this. Wait. And then he goes, oh, wait, darn it.
Wait, I thought that was more evidence.
Hey, I need you to open it. That is a document.
Nope.
Oh, it is.
Sorry.
Oh, it is? You got me. Shoot.
I thought they were supposed to say, "You've got served." They don't do that?
They don't do that.
That's just in the movies?
That's
Damn.
just in the movies.
That's so funny.
That, I mean,
You
and
see a guy's day get ruined just right in a few seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's his entire week. And the thing is the amazing thing about this is this has been going on for probably weeks. He's been anticipating this. Like, I got to make sure I can't get served. And he's probably also it's even possible that he's been moving around so that there's no place where he can prove a residence.
Oh, yeah.
Boom.
Well, he has a
Watch.
little bit of
Wait,
security or
did
something.
did I take this?
Oh.
No. And then he looks at it. He's like, I shouldn't
He's
have
like,
taken
can I drop it? No, I
wasn't-
can't drop it. Shoot.
Was it, sir? Take this back, please.
That was a smooth move by the process server. I wonder if they have different techniques for different kinds of people. Like that guy, that could have been some sort of, I don't know. I mean, like autograph signing that he thought he was doing, and that's.
But the veteran hat was a good touch. Like,
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
I was wondering if he was in costume in some level, or he just he brought out oh, I'm going to put my veteran hat on. That'll do it. That was pretty great. I guess we could talk about this Charlie Kirk thing. I mean, this is their agenda for the midterm elections. It is, and Atrios had a very good post about this, about what the implications of this are, far more reaching than the midterm elections. Let's talk about let's play this Kirk, and then I'll mention what Atrios had said.
The other side.
Oh, you still got on slow. That's
the Democrats. How are they reacting? Well, Eric Adams is now announcing that he is going to put up gay billboards, pro-gay billboards all across Florida in an effort to try to draw people out of Florida and back into New York. Eric Adams, who was supposed to be a common sense mayor, who's turning out to be a total disaster, says, quote, "We are going to purchase digital billboards for the next 8 weeks in 5 major Florida markets, including Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, and West Palm Beach, to attract gay people back to New York." Why? He can't really answer why. Quote, "New York City, where the Stonewall Inn riots ignited what many consider to be the birth of the modern LGBTQ plus movement," never heard of it, "has long voiced its support
Wait, pause
for
it.
that
He's never
community."
heard of. I presume he's saying he has never heard of Stonewall.
Oh, I thought he was saying LGBT.
LGBTQ
Or
plus.
plus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Like
making fun of the plus part. Or
Do you
the-
think so? I think he's talking about Stonewall.
I think it's the plus.
I think it's the Stonewall he's never heard of.
I mean, that's.
Talk about
Awesome.
bathing in your own ignorance.
You should know better than to say that out loud.
I mean, and particularly
act like you're familiar with it.
Right.
Yeah, and particularly if you're, the anti-gay warrior that he claims to be on some level, because that was actually like there was a reason why there was riots because the cops were coming down there to beat heads.
I mean, that's the thing is like, can the right incorporate Stonewall into their like sort of thought process, or do they have to deny that it exists? Because can they just say like, oh yeah, we like that the cops were doing that?
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's true.
To attract gay people back to New York. Why? He can't really answer why. Quote, "New York City, where the Stonewall Inn riots ignited what many consider to be the birth of the modern LGBTQ plus movement," never heard of it, "has long voiced its support for that community.
Stonewall.
Now it wants its message to be heard in one place, especially Florida." Of course, the homosexual community in Florida, for whatever reason that Eric Adams is trying to pander to, do you think that, I actually think many of the gays in Florida are in support of the fact that kids should not be taught about things that are this explicit when they're 5, 6, or 7 years old.
What? Pause it. What is it? What is the explicit teachings that are happening when they're 5, 6 years old? They've never been able to provide specifics or specific evidence on this.
that is what they just want this to be an intimidating thing, like a slap suit.
Yeah. Well, no, just talking about gay people, talking about trans people is explicit
Well, they
because
wanna-
that act is of love, but in their mind, that act of deviance is inherently explicit and disgusting and demonic.
The ambiguity here is important because they want to imply that they're actually teaching them much, much worse things. Hence,
Yeah.
like the groomer language that you see just thrown around all the time.
Right.
But really, what they want to do is stop you from saying, like, yeah, it's okay if their two dads have a kid.
And they conflate that with
no,
pedophilia.
It's even worse than that because you contemplate the idea of like, a teacher in fifth, with like in kindergarten, let's say, or first grade. Oh, how was everybody's vacation? I went with my husband and we went to, Yosemite.
Right.
And if that teacher is a woman, there's nothing explicit about what's going on there. But if that teacher is a man and says, I went with my husband to Yosemite, all of a sudden you're now like, you're promulgating and you're grooming.
And then you're fired. And then that's a way to, one, undercut teachers, as Matt has made this point a lot. But also, two, the bonus, the cherry on top is the teachers that do maybe remain in the system or the ones that are able to like go along with this. Those are our kind of people.
Ideological discipline.
Yeah.
The GOP legislation, which has drawn intense national scrutiny, no, it hasn't. It's actually popular amongst Democrats. Bars instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade, which the mayor called a target attack on the LGBTQ population. They even say what it is in this news article. The GOP legislation that has drawn intense national scrutiny, bar instruction and sexual orientation. Look, if you're against, let me say this differently. If you're for teaching kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade about sexual orientation and gender identity, you got some serious problems.
Pause.
In fact, we should
we do that right now in every class. Let's read this story about the princess and the frog. Whatever, the frog or whatever, the prince and all of it.
Wait, are like if there's separate restrooms, is that participating in gender culture?
Of course. Of course. It is what they are doing is they're trying to take us back to a time where, and I don't know how much we ever left it, but it is the dramatic difference between where we were 30 years ago and where we are today, where it is where the existence of gay people is an abnormality that is definitionally hypersexualized. The mere existence of gay people was explicit and sexualized, as opposed to, I'm a man, I happen to be married to a man. I'm a woman, I happen to be married to a woman. In the same way that the teacher, a woman says, I'm a woman, I happen to be married to a man. And they are returning us back to an era where you're going to be, where kids are going to feel stigmatized. And like I say, there's plenty of places in this country where that era never ended. But it was far more dramatic when I was a kid. The idea that you could have a gay person on television was people wouldn't even understand what that even meant if you were a kid at that time. Yeah, I mean, this honestly is that is we're going backwards on this, and that's what this part of this project is about.
I'm trying to find the poll that he cited there, but basically it seems like the Wall Street Journal editorial board on April 1st spoke about one particular poll. I can't speak to its methodology, but public opinion strategies, that 61% of people said they supported Don't Say Gay, but 26% opposed. And they specifically also targeted voters in the suburban in the suburban areas and Democratic voters. But the other polls have contradicted it, including an Ipsos poll that found 62% were opposed.
But the point is that it depends on how, I mean,
depends on how it's framed.
Well, it's how it's framed, and the legislation is written such a way that it is vague enough, and it appears as if, like, you know, your 5-year-old is being shown pictures of two people having sex who are of the same sex, as opposed to, like, and I don't think anybody believes that you should be showing 5-year-olds picture of people having sex,
right?
As opposed to the idea of simply noting, in the way that we note unconsciously, when we have for decades, where hetero people note that they're involved in a heterosexual relationship in passing. They don't want that to happen, or they want to stop it from happening with gay people.
Yeah, if a heterosexual teacher kisses their spouse on the lips, is that sexualizing the children or grooming them in any way? But here, if it's two gay couples, that's like 5-alarm fire. Let's get the police on them.
Right. Or just even the idea of, like, expressing it.
I have a husband. I have a wife.
Exactly.
GOP legislation that has drawn intense national scrutiny, bar instruction and sexual orientation. Look, if you're against, let me say this differently. If you're for teaching kindergarten, first, second, and third grade about sexual orientation and gender identity, you got some serious problems. In fact, we should probably, like, surveil you, like, some real problems.
You are a child
But
predator.
Eric Adams is totally on.
That's it.
Well, here's the real question. Where's the examples? The multitude of examples that were taking place that required this legislation. Give us an example of what you're talking about. This is what is not being done. No one is forcing the Republicans who promote this type of legislation to give an example of what this legislation addresses. And the reason why you don't get that is because they don't want it to address a specific example. They want it to be general enough so that in general it appeals to people's sense of, like, what is appropriate with kids, but also in general enough so that it can be used as a weapon to drive people into the closet.
Yeah.
The surveil thing, that's a Charlie Kirk favorite. He was, of course, responsible for the professor watch list that TPUSA put out that had put a whole bunch of professors on the list for supposed like leftist sympathies. On Twitter, this is from a Google article on it. On Twitter, some noticed that the Turning Point list seemed to disproportionately name academics of color compared with white professors. Only 7.3% of Harvard faculty are black, yet 5 of the 7 professors featured on the professor watch list were black. So we know what Harvard. Kirk is basically just a volunteer McCarthyite.
And this is just a revival of the satanic panic of the 80s, and they're just changing it to pedophilia in general, watering it down. That Maplewood, New Jersey, which was like in my back door growing up, that case where the nursery school teacher was unjustly demonized, and basically the kids were coached into saying that she was participating in these mass satanic rituals that were also pedophilic exercises with rectal thermometers and stuff. They want that to happen on a mass scale. I think she went to prison, if I'm not mistaken, and was, it was found to be unjust eventually. But they want that on a mass scale throughout the country.
I do think this is like an extension of that same sort of like a theme. I mean, this is none of this stuff, like, again, has ever gone away. It's just that it has become is returned as a tentpole. This is how George W. Bush won in 2004. We'll see. All right. One more call. Final call of the day. Calling from a 304 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Ren calling from Oregon. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you for the first time in a while.
Yeah, hi,
Ren from Oregon. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about a couple things, but let me just get out of my workspace.
Yeah.
Why are we getting a phone issue today?
She says she's getting out of her speaker.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, my manager is a QAnon truther, and so are half my coworkers, so it's not good to talk about trans stuff around.
I remember you said that last time.
Yeah.
All right, we'll give you a second.
Anyway, I am now outside of my workplace, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about different stuff with trans rights and the intersection of different stuff. There is a new law that has passed the state house in the state of Oklahoma, I believe, that is a bathroom ban everywhere for trans women and in schools for trans men. And it is the first time that a law like that has gotten anywhere in a state legislature since, I believe, 2014 in North Carolina. And yeah, that's really concerning.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about some stuff with protesting. I've been doing some community organizing in my local community. I'm in like a Trump plus 25 district, so it's been kind of interesting, but I don't know. You'd be surprised how many people there are that really either don't care or have positive takes on this. Like, I don't know. Like, I've been speaking with like ANCAPs and people that are like really out there, like gender critical people, talking for like 2, 3, 4 hours. And a lot of people, like when they actually interact with a trans person, will have a much more mild take, or at the very least say, oh, well, you're obviously one of the good ones. I feel like it's important for like every trans person that is that is safe if they come out, to come out and to try to, I guess, counter some of the polarization that's going on. I'm not saying that's every individual person's burden to bear, but I feel like we should be doing it as a community, because that is really the only way that we counter this polarization that we're seeing. It's the only way that we counter people moving to areas that are more more politically hospitable for them. You have to show people that no, we don't just live in the cities. We work at your grocery stores. We serve you coffee. You know, like, you interact with us on a weekly, if not daily basis. And the only way you can escape us is to escape society entirely.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a burden to necessarily have to represent, for each individual to have to represent a community, but at the same,
Everyone's individual circumstance is different.
right.
And, I recognize that for me, it was pretty terrifying to do, but I come to realize that, things seem a lot scarier when you think about the potential ramifications and what the outcome is actually going to be, because the outcome is that most of the time people are a lot of bark and little to no bite. If someone's in a position where they could lose housing or a job or be physically in danger, that's one thing. But yeah, I also wanted to say that, well, I guess I was going to ask, is there anyone that is like a correspondent for your show or anyone on your program frequently that is trans or that is like gender diverse or queer?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be kind of nice if you guys had someone who was more, I guess, versed in terms of like lived experience of these issues that could come on every now and then to talk about that stuff. I don't know. It'd be nice.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's a lot that I want to do in terms of like adding to the diversity of the show, without a doubt. But
Yeah, and I don't think that's something you like force or anything, but I think that's like, oh, hey, I have a trans friend that is, vocal and active in activist spaces. Maybe we can, have them on or ask them for comment about what their take is on XYZ specific issue.
yeah, that's a good point. Well, I appreciate the call, and I appreciate you calling in, Ren.
Thanks so much for your time, Sam. Look forward to calling in later.
All right,
Bye.
good. Bye-bye. All right, folks, that signals the end of our phone call portion of the program. I apologize for the many people holding on for so long. And we will do a couple more IMs, and then we will get going. Bradley's mom. Emma, you, Matt, and Sam are all smart, charismatic, kind, and good-looking people. However, my son Bradley is smarter, more charismatic, kind, and extremely handsome. Please hand over the show to him, and I will make all of you some tasty cookies.
Is that her action? That's actually her? You said your mom
That is
listens.
not Bradley's mom.
She watches, right? So, but
Keister. Tuning in late, palm oil deforestation is a tremendous source of climate change. Not only do they burn carbon as accumulated for many millenniums, they're burning the lungs of the earth. People should boycott. I do, and it's easy. Slappy Tubbs. I really think all these culture war shenanigans Republicans would be far less effective electorally if Democrats doubled down on legislation that gave us permanent child monthly credit, college debt cancellation, Medicare for all. The leadership has to die, and soon.
maybe in part,
but
wouldn't get rid of the problem.
It wouldn't get rid of the problem, but it certainly would take. I almost think that, like, to be honest with you, like, I'm not sure I'm convinced that providing material benefits will have a one-to-one electoral value, particularly in the short run. I think the primary reason why you provide material benefits like you're talking about are because it makes society better. But I also think that just like the idea of doing it would take the oxygen out of the media narrative of this stuff. Like, what are the Democrats doing that is taking up the space here? You're basically, it's just like an open field. And the Republicans can just run on, and the conservative movement can basically say that the primary fundamental issue facing us in modernity right now is the idea that a trans girl could be playing, girls basketball, or that a gay teacher could be talking about their spring break trip with their husband or wife. And because there's nothing else. Because, Democrats are in better shape at that point where it's like, they're being attacked for giving free college. They're being attacked for giving the child tax credit. I understand you got Manchin, but it may have failed to do that, but there's certainly executive actions that Joe Biden could be taking right now that would change the conversation.
And I just want to point out about legislation like this in Florida with Don't Say Gay. Didn't they just do a copycat bill in Oklahoma? Am I wrong about that? Ohio? Sorry. I'm getting the copycat abortion bills confused with, right. There's no way really to disprove if the teachers are abiding by these standards, right? Say the child asks the teacher, are you married to a man or a woman? I don't know, a hypothetical situation, or relays something to their parent that the conservative parent was like, we all know that Mrs. Johnson is married to a woman. Like how deviant is that? They can just make something up to oust that kind of teacher. They really can, if they feel that they're participating in a queer agenda. It's a way to target them and put a target on their backs, and you have no idea where the shot's coming from.
And we should also say, my understanding is that once this parent files suit, the school is responsible for paying the cost of the parent's lawyers.
What does that do in terms of a chilling effect of queer teachers getting hired?
100%. 100%. That's it. I mean, that's exactly.
I want to go with candidate A, but candidate B, but candidate B is gay.
Or it's more like, you should know. We have certain rules. How often do you talk about your family at school? We don't appreciate that type of thing. I just heard this, and someone just IM'd it too. Apparently, Eric Boehlert died from a bicycle accident.
That's awful.
Yeah, awful. Rest in peace. All right. Let's read just a couple more IMs and then we'll get out of here. Kristen Need, MR Crew, love you. By the show, by the way, I forgot to mention Matt is exactly right about deep dish pizza. I don't feel so comfortable about doing that. All right, two more. V, popping bottles. This is Sam now. Who's on first for Boomer Sam? And Unfunny Clownfish. Marsha Blackburn, grade school biology, not in Florida. All right, folks. Oh, Emma will be here tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday.
It's throwing you off, right?
Totally.
Yeah, you thought it was tomorrow's Wednesday.
Totally. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I thought tomorrow was Friday yesterday.
it completely threw me off. And despite the fact that I was not woken up in the middle of the night because of
vomit everywhere.
Yes. Matt, Emma, Bradley, great job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes